Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression. And I am here to bring you this week's Living the Shift. Funny because I almost did not do this week. There's been a lot coming up, a lot going through. There's a lot that I'm working on a whole new website, all this kind of stuff. And and so I've been doing a lot of inner work. I blocked off this week to do a lot of that. To get this website done. But anyhow, I was going to skip today, and literally, like, I had posted that I was going to skip today. And then all of a sudden I get this guidance, oh no, it's important to talk about this. And there has been some pervasive themes, really loud, pervasive themes that have been coming up in the past several weeks. One that I'm looking at again and again and again is the way we're having conversations. And it's really, I've been observing this a lot, and we look at how we as a culture, as a world, have gotten to this point of so much negativity. And I'm not saying this with judgment, this is just an observance, but I mean, think about it. Think about how we have gotten into this deeply embedded habit of connecting through negativity. So think about it. How many times do you start up a conversation with somebody, and the first thing you talk about is what's going on that's bad, right? Or, oh yeah, I feel like this, or something that's sensational. Oh, did you hear about that accident or that abduction? Or did you hear about that catastrophe? Or, have you been? Oh, I've been all right, but this and this and this and this. And and then what's really interesting is, even in conversations, if you listen to conversation amongst people, and this was really pervasive when I was in corporate, but it's somebody comes in and says, oh, I had a flat tire on my way to work. And then you have 50 people that all join in and start talking about their flat tire stories and oh, how horrible theirs was and how horrible theirs was. Look at people who are pregnant. I remember being pregnant both times. Good morning, Gloria. Good morning, Sarah. I remember both times I was pregnant with my kids, and it was the last trimester, people would talk to me, and they wouldn't talk to me about, the beautiful things about having a child and all that kind of stuff, but they'd be like, oh, let me tell you about the horror story that I had in giving birth. This is how we can have gotten into the habit of connecting. This is so we're having this talking, and this is really important energetically. I'll tell you why, because the energy that we give the words that we're speaking is the energy that we create within our lives. So if we spend all of this time focusing on negative, and we spend all this time focusing on what's wrong in our lives, then we will create it more. We will create what's wrong more. I get into the habit of speaking to people, and I say things like, so what's great about today? What's great about your life right now? And what's unfortunate is that there are so many that have answered me I don't know. I can't think of anything. And so we're in this almost like a cultural depression, a worldwide depression in many ways. And we're going through all this change. And the way for us to let go of this change is to really be present in the moment, to find a place of love in every moment, no matter what the situation looks like, right? However, if we are continuously, so many of us, we start with that, and then we start focusing on that, but then we get into this place of, okay, so I'm here great by myself, but as soon as I'm with other people, I fall into the same thing. I start judging other people. I start talking about other people and other things. I start talking about what's awful about my life. Or what's going on with me, or the injuries or sickness or something that I have. So, and then I have people say to me, I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm not allowed to talk about what's wrong. And I'm like, yeah. So the key is to see it for what it is, because wrong and right are a judgment, right? So my friend Sarah Evignoni, who just joined, posted a blog. She posted a blog yesterday on the Trinity Energy Progression site about that right and wrong judgment thing, right? So we go through all this, and if we're in this habit of constantly judging right and wrong, and what's wrong and what's bad and what's better and what's worse, then we get lost in that. we lose ourselves outside of the moment. So when we are judging everything that we do against what's wrong or what's bad or whatever, like we have all these things about judgments in our mind saying, well, and here's some really hidden ones. Okay. Hey, Sarah. And so what we have so many hidden judgments in there. We have things like, and beliefs. Like one is, if I don't commiserate with others, we talk about how many times have you heard the conversation, the statement, oh, misery loves company. And if we feel like we don't commiserate or have anything wrong, then we feel like that we're going to be left out or excluded from the human condition, from the human experience, or from other people. And people aren't just going to want to talk to us or whatever, which is really funny, because what actually happens, hey, Anne, is the opposite. When we change the pattern of our speech and the way we're talking and the way we hold our energy in presence, not only with ourselves, but with other people, eventually others start to realize that they feel better when they're talking to you, because we're not talking about stuff that makes us feel ickier. Because if we sit and talk about negative things all day, we will do nothing but feel negative, and we will drag the energy down. So with all the change going on right now, the best thing for us to do is to raise our vibration, to keep our vibration in a higher space. And the more we stay in a place of love and presence, the higher the vibration is. So we don't get there by talking constantly about what's wrong and what's bad and what's, in exclusion of or in lack of in our world. And it's not that it doesn't exist. It's not that we're ignoring it. It's that we're acknowledging it, but then we're just seeing it for what it is, because right and wrong is a judgment. It's created from the ego and separation. And when we come to this place of wholeness and unconditional love, and we step out and see the bigger picture, we ask the question, so how does this serve me? How does this serve the bigger picture? So this is part of how I work with people to help shift them and help them to shift themselves, help them to shift themselves into a place of a new habit, right? And that's what we teach as a foundation, even within Trinity, before we even go into the energy part. It's it's being able to see things from a much bigger perspective and to say, okay, so if this bugs me, why? It's a trigger inside of me. It's a belief that I'm holding. It's something that is for me to look at. Right. And there's so many different ways we can go with that. But when we can acknowledge things like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling crappy today, or something like that. Right. If someone's like, okay, I'm just feeling icky today. See, for me, when that happens, the biggest thing is I step back and go, so why do I feel that way? Like, what's the energy? Is the energy me? Is it collective? What's coming up collectively or individually, and this is what we get into the habit of in terms of consciousness and energy healing. But we can just do this stuff even if you're not an energetic practitioner at all. But like, all of us are actually practitioners in energy, because that's what we live. We are living energy. We are a consciousness of energy. So everything we do is an amplification and embodiment of the energy that's present in the multiverse. So when we are constantly putting energy to things like anger and fear and hate and exclusion and lack, then we're holding the vibration down and keeping us in this very, very separate, dense place. And the more we start allowing ourselves to step back and stop judging, and to just look at things from a bigger picture with presence and acceptance, and to say, okay, so what's the bigger picture? What does this look like? What is it really saying here, right? That's and that, to me, it was sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. Like, I find that more interesting anyways. So what's the bigger picture? What's the message that this is giving me and us, instead of saying, oh, well, that's horrible. It's like, well, what is that here for? What is that in my reality and our reality for, if it's manifested? And there's usually a lesson. Like, so here's a perfect example. So many, like there's the, especially in the spiritual community, there's a lot of really gut-wrenching antagonism toward the president of the current president of the United States. And I have this conversation all the time, and I'm like, okay, so But the reality is, let's step back and look at this and why he's in the presidency right now. And I'm keeping neutrality. I'm like not saying I'm against or for. It's like, okay, so not something I might have agreed with, but I did because I'm here in this reality collectively, right? But we've gotten to the point where we have an entire political and institutional structure that does not serve us anymore. That is very, very separate and exclusionary based and all that kind of stuff. And so what we have chosen in the past is, okay, the least of all evils, right? And then we just bury our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening because it's comfortable, because we can be comfortable enough, because we can be good enough. And so what we have is somebody in here now, finally, that we're just seeing how really broken everything is, that first of all, that could have happened. And second of all, like what continues to happen around us. So it's actually inspiring a lot of people to get involved with politics, a lot of people to be more involved in the whole and collective. It's inspiring a lot of change, even if it feels like it's breaking down and it's awful. It's actually just pushing us into change that we were ignoring that really needed to happen because it really didn't serve us in this higher vibration. So there's no judgment there. Okay, so I accept the change. I accept change, and I'm going to allow this because it doesn't serve me, and I'm going to let it fall away. So then I have nothing to add to a conversation about the negativity toward the president or anybody. It's like, okay, yeah, it's sort of cartoonish. It's sort of like bizarre, you know. Honestly, I always say, like, I sort of feel like our entire political and institutional system is all sort of cartoonish right now. But that's really showing us a really loud message for ourselves, for us to look at ourselves, because we agreed to this. We created this collectively and individually. So then what do we change? Okay. Then the other thing is to, like, then we get incensed. So when we get incensed about something, let's look at why we're incensed about it. Okay. So we get incensed about healthcare, right? We get incensed about looking at things like we need to have like more people, like more, universal healthcare and all that kind of stuff. And we rage against the machine of the pharmaceutical world, and we rage against the machine of the Western medicine world and all this kind of stuff. The more we become aware of what's going on and the limiting and exclusionary way that it is developing and creating this really bipolar reality. So what do we do? So like the thing is, okay, so what's behind that? Like what could be the higher purpose to that, or the higher picture that's creating a mirror that's causing us to look at ourselves? Like what would be there to change? What would there be to change? And you know, I had gotten, I don't know, I think 10 years ago now, like I had gotten the message that drugs were going to stop working. Western medicine was going to stop working. Well, the funny thing is, it has stopped working. The whole system has stopped working in many respects, right? I can't tell you how many people I know who've gone to the doctor and like doctor after doctor, and they can't do this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, right, because it's time for us to turn inside and realize we're the ones who heal ourselves. It's time to turn inside and realize that all the physical stuff comes from the non-physical stuff. It's time for us to realize that nothing heals us but ourselves, and that we have all the power to do so. And we also have the knowledge at our fingertips and inside of us of how to have an exalted experience in the physical embodiment that we're in. So like, okay, if we are wanting to be healthy, then now, and I'm saying like other things come up. Yes. So there are people who eat healthy and live healthy and everything else and then die of a heart attack. And that's fine. That's another energetic reason altogether. But I mean, like, we'll talk about this and talk about this and talk about this. And then somebody will, you know, like eat McDonald's 4 days a week or 3 days a week, or, you know, or eat like stuff that just doesn't serve them energetically. And so like they don't eat food that actually nourishes them, or have a life that actually nourishes them. And then they complain about it because they don't feel good. So this is what I'm talking about, the conversations, right? And there's a part of us collectively that believes I need to do this to be part of the human condition. And so the conversation to change is, you know, like, what am I doing to change things? Like, instead of complaining, and I had this conversation with my daughter just the other day. I said, when I was a manager in corporate, I always had my door open. I was always open to the conversation of anything that needed to be fixed, anything that wasn't running as efficiently as possible. But my one condition was, will come to me with some kind of suggested solution, even if it's not the one we choose, but to open the door to, okay, so what way can we change this so that we can make it better? We have a whole lot of negativity going on right now, right? People are just obsessed with every little tiny thing that's going on in the news. And they stop at the place of saying, oh, isn't that horrible? Oh, I have to send prayers to this. Instead of saying, what is the mirror that is showing me? What is the mirror that's showing us? Because if it weren't of a reason or for a cause or for some kind of lesson that we are that we haven't seen yet, then we would not have it in our reality. So it takes a whole lot of reconditioning, a whole lot of repatterning and rehabituation. And again, that's what I teach in the basics. The foundational part of the Trinity classes is really helping that rehabituation as we come into that place of self-love and recognition and seeing things from the higher perspective. But everybody can do this every day. It's just something that we have to commit to, because number one is like getting up in the morning and starting out with what is great about today. Like, what do you have gratitude about in this moment? For example, I live in North Carolina in the United States. And so we've had the craziest, rainiest year that I can remember since I've been here. It's been 23 years now, right, that I've lived in North Carolina. So much rain we had last year. And yes, everything's green and everything else. We had so much rain over the winter. It was like crazy how gray it was all the time. And yeah, after a while, I was like, okay, I'm sort of done with this. But part of it is just to flow through it, be present with where you are, because guess what? Right now, we have the most amazingly beautiful weather. Right now, our spring is the best spring that we've had. And it's just like, it's, 70s to 80s and it's dry. I can have the windows open. And, and then a lot of people jump right into, oh, but the allergies and everything else. And I'm like, nope, don't have any allergies, right? But I can appreciate so like the sunshine and the green, like we have really abundant green now because of all the water we've had and stuff. So like, that's a simple thing to appreciate every morning. Actually appreciate every morning having rain, even though we had such a monsoon kind of a season, and like looking at the other side of the country where they had a lot of drought, and now I understand they're caught up. But the thing is, you appreciate the everyday things, that you can get out of bed, that you are awake, that you're here, that, like there's a jillion things that you can look at that you can be grateful for every day. So it's a little awkward in the beginning when we first start getting into that habit again, into the habit of a much more positive conversation, because we are such in the habit of having the conversation about what's ailing somebody, or what's wrong with somebody, or what's getting somebody angry, or what's causing somebody to be in a snit. And like I said, it's really important to look at why we're in a snit or upset or angry, furious, whatever. And that's okay to talk about, but when we talk about it, it's to talk about like why it comes from me. Like, why am I angry about it? Because I can do something about it. It's my reality that I create. And even when we have situations around us that don't seem like they're related to us, everything we do has a ripple effect. And so we can also choose to just deal with it completely differently. Yeah, Gloria says there's always something to be grateful for. There's always something to be grateful for. And so I always have the effort of trying to change the flow of the conversation when somebody's really, like stuck in that negative thing. And I'm like, okay, so what's there to be thankful for? Like, what is good in your life? Like, what is it that you would like to express in a place of joy and love? And what's really interesting is that we have this collective resistance to being in a place of love and connecting through love, because it's almost like we've forgotten how to do it in many respects. And I'll tell you, it took a big pattern. But the thing is, the people with whom I'm associated, my friends and my spiritual circle and whatever, that have attracted to me as, I've gone along, is we have great conversations where they're so productive and they're so wonderful. And we talk about the amazing things that are happening and the magical, shifting that's going on here on earth, because we can see it, because we look at it all the time. And so it becomes more prominent, and the more prominent it becomes, the more it really takes over our reality. And then the things that seem like little, like negative things are like, they're, number one, they're just little crumbs, but they're also just a quick reflection of, okay, something for me to shift and then move on. And they don't become so daunting anymore. So it's not to never talk about, like, if you're sad, you can be sad. That's another thing when people do this kind of work, then they feel like they can never talk about anything that is considered negative. But the thing is the energy you get behind it. One of the first things that I tell people all the time is to stop watching the news. Stop watching the regular news, because all they talk about is stuff from a negative perspective. And a lot of times they miss the positive part, or they cut out the positive part, or the positive stories, or what they call the feel-good stories, because, oh, that doesn't get people excited. True, like that's the habit we've gotten into. That's the addiction to drama that we've had collectively. So the first step to all of this is really saying, okay, I choose to not be a part of it anymore. I choose to come from a place of love. I choose to remember how to do that. And I choose to commit myself to practicing that every day and every moment. And just having having a gratitude journal is great. Starting out the day with something to notice that you're grateful for, and you can have something different every day, is a great way to start, because it's better to start that way than to get up and say, oh, what a crappy day it's going to be. Guess what you're doing? You're creating that. Dr. Isaru Emoto did a whole bunch of studies on the first book, I think, was The Hidden Messages in Water. And if you look on YouTube, you can look up Dr. Emoto's water experiments, because there are tons of people who have done them, including myself. So what they did was they set up in the experiment these bottles of water, containers of water. And they put, like, on one container all these lovely words like love and joy and amazing and magical and all kind of stuff. And then they had one, actually I think it was two, and then people have added the third. And then one was the opposite. It was like, oh, like hate and fear and darkness and da-da-da-da-da, right? And they set them up in two different places. And then, like, every day they would go and say beautiful, loving words or sing to the positive one. And then they would go to the negative one and, like, yell at it and call it names and insult it and all that kind of stuff. So then they did these, as they were freezing the water, they looked at the crystals. And what was really interesting was the positive water container, the water from the positive water container had these beautiful snowflake looking, perfect sacred geometry crystals that were just gorgeous, right? Crystalline. And then the one from the negative water just had, like, it was like they were deformed, they were inconsistent. Very interesting, right? So people have done so many experiments. And what they do is the rice experiment, where you actually put rice in the water and you do the same thing with the containers. And so, like, and then you put it in the closet, and you have very similar conditions and everything else. And then what has happened time and time again is the container, like, and you do this over a period of months, the container with the rice and the water in it that had all the positive energy given to it stays really intact for a really long period of time. And then the one with the negative energy will mold, it'll turn green, it's really interesting. So think about that. And we're talking about the energy of words, and we're talking about the energy. Yeah, Gloria says these experiments were awesome. They are. So go on YouTube it's really cool. But anyway, and then try it for yourself, because I did, and I was like, wow. And actually I found a third element, which was the worst. I actually created a third one that got ignored completely instead of, like, positive or negative. And that one did the worst out of everything, which is really interesting. But anyhow, so the point is, our bodies are what, like 70% water, 80% water, something like that, 60% water, between 60 and 80% water. And if you think about the thoughts and the words that we use and the energy that goes through them and what gets registered and programmed into that water, think about what we're doing to our bodies just by the words and energy that we use all the time, right? And this is really simple, but we don't think about it. So if we hold on to fear, if we hold on to anger, if we judge all the time, if we're just talking about negative stuff and how awful things are, what we're going to do is we're going to feel awful. We're going to manifest awful feeling things in our bodies and in our lives, and we will just perpetuate that, so then it becomes a downward spiral. I call it the Eeyore syndrome, right? Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, like everything always was terrible, you know? So like the key is to start pulling ourselves out of it. And it's not that like nobody can be depressed or whatever, but it's like part of it is we're just out of this habit. So when we start looking at things like self-love and telling ourselves, I love you, and that I'm divine and worthy and perfect as I am, even with whatever's going on, because it's perfect for whatever I came here to learn, to teach, whatever, then we come to this place of acceptance, and that friction, that resistance starts to go away when we start looking at things from a bigger picture. So instead of like looking, if you are addicted to looking at the news, stop watching the news. What I tell people, stop watching the news and go out there. There are a number of websites now that focus on positive news, because there is a lot of positive, awesome stuff going on in the world right now. Actually, they were saying that there's more stuff being done to help improve the environment now than we have ever done before. Yes, we're also in a like the state of like a lot of things are broken, and that has started to motivate a whole movement of like looking at new ways of looking at things and doing things. So innovation, there's so much innovation in us, and that's what I try to commit myself to posting about, are the things that I see that look at this awesome stuff. Like, look at what we're doing to change things. Look at what we're doing in a positive light, from a place of unity, because the more we start to focus on that, the less energy, the less power we give that lower vibrational stuff. And then we find it more easy to see the bigger picture and to see things and understand them and like experience them energetically from a much more unified, accepting perspective of self-responsibility, to say, okay, so if that's in my reality, what is that showing me? What's the lesson for me to get from that I'm not seeing otherwise? Because if I did see it otherwise, it wouldn't be reflected to me at this level. And it takes a lot of self-awareness, but if we all did this one thing, it would change things so dramatically, right? I was finding myself like I have to step away from it. What's interesting is I'm such an extrovert. I love people. I love us being unified and together and connecting and all that kind of stuff. And yet I've been feeling in the past couple of weeks like this, there's so much change going on, and so many are getting lost in the drama of the change, that there's this huge blanket of despair that so many are trying to hold on to, instead of just letting it go and saying, you know what? Hey, that didn't serve us. That was something to look at. Why did this represent itself to us this way in this reality at this time? So that I can see it and not have to repeat it. And we don't have to repeat it collectively in an even bigger, louder way. Because I'll tell you what, the thing that we work from energetically when we do energy healing work and stuff like that is all this reality is created from within, right? It's all like not just as above, so below, it's as without, so within, like as within, so without. It's like what we have in our creation is our reality. It's all our reality. So when we take self-responsibility for our reality and say, if I have this in my reality, I'm giving this message to myself in a way that I haven't yet remembered. And what's the message? And to commit to saying, I'll see the message, I will shift it. And it's all about me. It's never about somebody else. It's not like, oh, well, they just need to be out of my life, whatever. It's like, or maybe I just need to be in a different, like, it's important for me to be in a different place. And it's all about me. It's not about other people. It's about how to come to that place of presence and unconditional love in every moment, in every situation, to be able to observe that. And when we do that, guess what? Our conversations do change. And I'll tell you, the conversations, like I said, I have with the people that are in my reality in general, many of them, it's so positive. And then it's really interesting, because then there are some that I look at in my reality that are just the opposite, have the Eeyore syndrome, right? And so I will consistently do my part of shifting the conversation, because honestly, it's like, okay, so I let you speak what you want to speak, say what you need to say, and it's like, okay, and I hear you. And so it's for you to look at, I get it within your reality. And this is where I come from, and then like, let's come to a place of happiness and much more gratitude about something else, or look at something more that you enjoy to do. Like one of the best things, there's some people that I know who are like that, and they're in my family or whatever. So it's just like, okay, so the best thing is to, like, some of the times, the best way to change the way the conversation is going is like being present with that person, like, what they enjoy and what they enjoy to talk about, like in a positive way that makes them perk up and get more lively. And I will shift the conversation in that direction, because when they do that, then they change their energy, and then then they're more open to even talking about more stuff with me and all that kind of stuff. So it's a way to, and it's not really a manipulation, but it's just a way to say, okay, I'm standing in this, and I would rather talk about stuff in an expansive way versus a contracting way, in a positive light versus a negative one, even if something is presented in a very negative way, in a very challenging way. And yes, we all still have judgment. We still have things that we are perceiving as right and wrong, whatever, and that's still that duality within us and the ego. So as we become more observant to it, then we can just sort of step back and be like, okay, well, I just see it as it is, and sometimes it's great to introduce to the conversation, oh, okay, well, everybody's saying, well, this is awful and this is terrible. It's like, okay, so, I don't know, as I see it, this is what it's saying in a message to all of us, or to, us, or whatever. Sometimes it's just the winds of change, and it's time to accept that things are changing. Sometimes it's, okay, so as things are changing, what else can I do? What can I do next? Where can I go next? Like in my life and in what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. So there are many, many ways of doing that, but just be observant. So the home play this week is to be observant to your own conversations with yourself and with other people, and do what you can to simply shift the energy when you're stuck in a negative place, to just say, okay, so like, here's the thing. We all have stuff. Every once in a while we have stuff that goes on with our physical bodies, and some more than others. And then we can say, you know what? Yep, I gotta have that going on. And, and yeah, of course I'm interested, and I hear, a lot of times it just comes to me as to what's causing that. But then that's just, if it's not part of the conversation, it's not part of the conversation. But because that's what I'm always doing with myself. And somebody says, oh, well, this is going on. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And I honor that. And then we move on to something else. And sometimes, because of the nature of what I do, a lot of people just want to get in, like, we'll get into the conversation of like, what do you think that's about? Or like, what do you think that message is? And I'll be like, well, what does your guidance say? And like, everybody who knows me knows this conversation. But, including myself, is like, wow, like if something comes up in the physical, like, I'll be like, so I don't understand why. Like, if I will only typically bring it up in a conversation if with somebody like of like heart, when I'm sort of stuck as to why it's there in my reality, and I've been doing all this self-work. And Gloria says, I'm with you, Angela. I'd rather talk about things in a positive way. It's so much more healing, honestly. If you're feeling bad, like when we talk about things that we feel good about, and it helps us to shift that energy, then we don't feel bad anymore. If we feel bad and we talk about feeling bad all the time, and nothing ever will shift us out of that energy, because we don't allow ourselves that opening. So think about that and just be present with that this week. So thank you for joining me. I'm glad we did this. This is actually a really important topic. There's so much going on around this. So commit to that space within yourself of presence and love and positivity in a bigger picture kind of way. So have a great week. Thank you so much for joining. This is Angela Coulter signing out with this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one.